one, having gone to 3 of the different negotiating sessions, one of the interesting things was to see the different dental groups. There were definitely dental groups who were pro-Mercury and dental groups who were very anti-Mercury. And this was one of those things that I think from a scientific perspective ended up being a little bit, it's a very technical issue. And it's interesting in the idea of communicating scientific findings to the public, because how do you explain to people that, okay, it's okay to leave in your mouth, but in a tiny fraction in a tuna, it can harm you. People don't really understand the different forms well enough to really understand that difference. One issue with dental mercury, again, the environmental impact. One of the substantial environmental impacts isn't actually in the vapor phase, it's in the releases. And what happens when the mercury comes out of the mouth and gets, if it's not disposed of properly, just rinsed down the drain. So one of the things we saw from a domestic regulatory context, actually specifically in Massachusetts, was that when amalgam separators were required in dental offices, again, there was a strong correlation, and we think potentially a causation in decreases in fish concentrations of mercury after several years. So that's one of the issues. In terms of the longevity issue, it's interesting for mercury because I think one of the issues with mercury is that it's not necessarily really obvious. It doesn't cause deaths in a way that sort of particulate matter causes deaths. It causes reduced capacity to learn, so that it's very difficult to actually see the effects. People might live just as long, but we can expect, based on studies that have been done, for example, with lead poisoning, that economic productivity might take a substantial hit. So, in the absence of mercury, you might see even more productivity, even more sort of capacity in your population on average. And again, this will differ. It's not a uniform distribution as well. So those kinds of issues.
And on the language in the convention, it's largely the WHO, the World Health Organization guidelines. So they were the ones that made the invention and basically support a phase out of mercury in dentistry, but is not demanding that they cease with it. And the same with the mercury in the vaccine. It's the same. They generally follow the World Health Organization guideline. So in terms of potential strengthening of the text in the convention, I would argue probably has to do whether the World Health Organization issue new recommendations or not. If they do that in the future, they will probably change the text accordingly. We basically punted and said, this is up to the World Health Organization. Whatever recommendation standards you set are the de facto convention standards.